Fall camp starts in 1 week, and outside of maybe 10 starting spots, there are a bunch up for grabs. And this staff's made it known that they'll play anybody, which means returning lettermen, true freshmen, or even guys from the transfer portal. With a completely open competition comes position battles, and those battles determine playing time, which means there's a few players who've got to prove themselves this camp if they want to live up to the hype they came in with. Nebraska returns some of the best talent in the West, and now that we're expecting competent coaching and a team that won't shoot itself in the foot, the individual talent actually matters since they won't be, or at least shouldn't be, stuck in a losing culture. I want to know which groups Marcus Satterfield and Tony White can look to in pressure situations and who impressed their coaches enough to earn a starting role. So today, I'm ranking every position group on the team. We'll look at the biggest position battles for fall camp, and we'll talk about the 5 guys who've got to prove themselves this season. But what's up, guys? I'm Connor Hayden, and this is Corn Crazed. If you're a fan of Nebraska or the Big Ten, hit the subscribe button below because we're less than 500 subscribers away from 18,000. And if you want a live player interview before the season starts, hit the like button now and help us get to 1,000. But now, let's get into it.
Thompson winds up, goes deep, got a man, touchdown!
We're going to start off by answering this question from Bayumba, who asked if the 2023 or the 2022 team is more talented and which position groups are better or worse. So we're going to do this by ranking each group, and then I'll let you know if I think they're taking a step forward or a step back from last year. Number 1 are the defensive backs, who return all 5 starters and almost all their depth. Malcolm Hartzog played great as a true freshman and should be a future draft pick. Both Quentin Newsome and Miles Farmer are back after starting the last 2 years, and Marquise Buford, Omar Brown, and Tommy Hill all either started or played a bunch. The group lost a couple backup corners and Jaden Gould at safety, but they'll take a huge step forward with Evan Cooper coming from the NFL and Tony White, who's got a great history coaching secondaries. This group is 100% better than they were a year ago. Number 2 is the running back room, and this was an easy choice for me because of who returns and who they lost. Last year, Anthony Grant pushed for 1,000 yards, and the only other back with over 20 carries was A.J. Allen. A.J. went into spring ball expecting to push for a huge role this season and potentially take the starting role from Grant, but that didn't happen. Gabe Ervin dominated the headlines, and even Ramir Johnson got his name in the mix, so Allen left for Miami, where he was pretty much guaranteed a bigger role. Grant, Ervin, and Johnson have all started multiple games, and each brings a different skill set to the table. Their opportunities were limited in the Whipple offense, but any of them could get hot with a lot more reps in this offense. So yes, they're better. My 3rd strongest unit are the linebackers, who lost one of their best pass rushers in Caleb Tanner, their most promising freshman in Ernest Hausman, and a couple guys who rotated. But they did keep Reimer and Henrich, and then they went and landed MJ Sherman, who could turn out to be better than Tanner was. The losses were significant, but with Henrich back in the lineup and guys like Jamari Butler and John Bullock getting praise from their coach, I don't think this group's taken a step back, so I'll call it a push. 4th is the offensive line, and just by default with the new bodies, I think they're in a position to improve. Nwili, Prohaska, and Scott are all new starters this year, and they've all shown they can be more than just serviceable in the Big Ten. Both Turner Corcoran and Ethan Piper can play multiple positions, which helps Raiola keep his front 5 from getting worn out, and Henry Latovsky should be better in his 3rd year in the program. I'm not expecting him to be elite, but I do think there will be improvement. The quarterback room ranks 5th, but that's not where I think they'll finish. I expect Jeff Sims to be as good in this offense as Casey was in Mark Whipple's. And both Chubba Purdy and Heinrich Harburg are going to be more prepared to manage a heavy run game than Smothers and Purdy were to play in last year's offense. And I do think they could win a game under the right circumstances. Because the depth is going to be better prepared to lead the offense, I'm giving the 23 unit the edge over 22. 6th is receiver, and this one's tough because they lost a superstar in Trey Palmer, but kept the number 2 in Marcus Washington. It comes down to whether you think Trey, Alante Brown, Oliver Martin, and Wyatt Lever are a better group than Billy Kemp, Xavier Betts, IGC, and Josh Fleeks. I lean the latter, but they're also unknown with a new offense and a new quarterback. So for now, I'm going to call this unit a push since this is a unit ranking and not just about a star player. Seventh is the D line, who lost both O'Shawn Mathis and Garrett Nelson at edge, and Colton Feast, Devin Drew, and Stephon Wynn at tackle. I feel good at nose with both Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher returning, but at the other two spots, they were rolling with a transfer, two true freshmen, and a converted tight end in the spring game. So there's just too much unknown for me to rank them any higher. Based on what we know so far, and since nobody's proven much, this group's behind last year's unit. And last, I've got the tight ends who lost their top two guys from last year. Thomas Fidoni's got massive upside, but he's never played. And Nate Borkacher has a total of 6 catches for 52 yards. We know the potential, but nothing's been proven, so they've got to be ranked behind Vokalek and Brewington from last season. Now, this is just my opinion, but it seems like 4 units got better, 2 regressed, and 2 stayed the same. So, although they lose their number 1 receiver, number 1 tight end, and number 1 pass rusher, the transfer portal helped to give the 2023 roster an edge when it comes to overall talent. The other day, I dropped a video where I went over a few expectations I had for this season, and one of them I thought about but didn't include was that a couple former big-time recruits would find more success under this new staff. So, since I didn't talk about it then, I'm going to give you 5 guys who were either big names coming out of high school or played a significant role at one point during the Frost era who have this year to prove they weren't just a one-hit wonder. We'll start off with Ramir Johnson, who took over as the starting running back in 2021 and finished with almost 700 yards and 6 touchdowns in only 10 games. I expected him to get a lot more opportunity last year, but A.J. Allen and Anthony Grant took over, and he ended up with less than 100 yards on the entire season. His 2 biggest games came against Michigan when he went for over 170 and Michigan State when he had 100. 2 teams that both finished in the top 10 that year. I don't expect him to beat out Grant or Irvin, but the offense has a special weapon who's fast and can catch it downfield if they can find a role for him. Next is Thomas Fidone, who was the number 1 tight end in the country coming out of high school. I've got a soft spot for this dude because I tore my ACL in my first game of my senior year and again as a college freshman. And I had to shut it down after that, but this guy refuses to quit. He had every reason to hit the portal to try and change his luck, but he decided to stay, and now he's got the chance to win the job. The potential is the top tight end in the Big Ten if he stays healthy and if he can get enough touches, so don't forget to say your prayers. Tommy Hill was one of the most important transfers in last year's class, and he started day 1 at corner before being swapped over to receiver. He's a great athlete with starting potential, but I think he was forced into a starting role too early, and he lost the job to Malcolm Hartzog after the 4th game. Hill was the 11th highest rated corner in his class and already started as a sophomore, recording 17 tackles and 4 pass breakups, so seeing him back on the field early should be expected. Teddy Prohaska is another 4-star recruit who's dealt with multiple season-ending injuries, but we at least got to see what he could do in 2 starts as a true freshman. Last year when he came back from the knee injury, he didn't look as confident, and the fear was that he'd never get back to full strength since he didn't look as comfortable putting pressure on the weaker leg. But with an extra offseason to get his leg strength back, the hope is that he starts at left tackle and picks up right where he left off against Michigan almost 2 years ago. And last is Arik Gilbert, who transferred in from Georgia, but still hasn't gotten a waiver from the NCAA. And whether he plays this year or not, he's desperate to bounce back strong and make it to the NFL after having a really good freshman season at LSU and being one of the highest rated tight ends of all time coming out of high school. He's a generational talent who I'm sure gets to the NFL whether he plays or doesn't, but if he could get on the field against Big Ten teams this year and show he's still Arik Gilbert, it'll really boost his stock. Before we get into the last segment, I wanted to let you know that I'll be live this Thursday, sometime in the late afternoon after all the players and coaches are done speaking at Big Ten Media Days. And this is going to be our first live show back about a month before the season actually starts. And our guest for that stream is going to be Adam Carricker, who will jump on for an interview to kick that show off. So I'm hoping to see a lot of you there since it's been a few months since we've had a big live stream. Now I want to talk about position battles because most of the depth chart's still up in the air, and even though there will be multiple rotators at each spot, there can only be one starter. So let's start this off with tight end. We've got two names at the top of the list, Thomas Fidone and Nate Borkercher. One came to Lincoln as a walk-on 3 years ago, and the other was considered a future second-round pick in the NFL. Fidone's crazy talented. He looks like a receiving tight end, and I'd guess he's one of the top three hungriest guys on the team. Borkature isn't nearly as hyped, but he's played in 14 games and caught 8 passes in his career so far, so the coaches know he's fully capable. I guess Fidone wins the number one spot as a pass catching tight end since he's got the speed and athleticism to give him the edge, but he's been injury prone and their other option is fully capable of taking on a bigger role. At receiver, I'm guessing Kemp and Washington lock down the inside spots, but who ends up becoming the number one deep threat? IGC came out strong last year against Northwestern and finished the day with 4 catches for 120 yards, including a 32-yard touchdown grab over a DB. He averaged almost 16 yards a catch at New Mexico State 2 years ago, and his highlights were all just him running great routes and torching defenses. Xavier Betts is taller and might actually be a little faster, but is he strong enough to win one-on-one battles with the stronger Big Ten DBs? They have similar skill sets, but totally different body types, and I think the guy who becomes the primary target will be the one who shows the coaches that he's not going to make mistakes. Gabe Ervin and Anthony Grant come from the same high school in Georgia and have both held the same title as running back one in Lincoln, but who gets the first snaps? Gabe's built more like a Big Ten back since he's taller and heavier, but Anthony Grant's already shown that he can succeed if the line blocks for him. Rhule loved talking about Gabe all spring, and it led a lot of us to believe it's his job to lose. But Grant's 915 yards rushing and the ability to catch it out of the backfield can't be overlooked. The issue with Gabe is that on his first 57 carries, he only averaged 3.8 yards, but it's hard to blame him since the O-line seemed to get beat almost every time he touched the ball. If you want to see what a healthy Gabe looks like post-knee surgery, look up his highlights versus Oklahoma last year. But before you get too excited, remember that was against their number 2 defense. At offensive tackle, Teddy Prohaska, Turner Corcoran, and Bryce Benhart are all going to battle for 2 spots. Teddy's shown the most promise of the 3, but he's also played the least since he's had 2 major injuries. Rhule's been very complimentary of Benhart, and he even made it on to Phil Steele's All-Big Ten team, despite some of the struggles in the past. And Corcoran's been starting on the line since he was a true freshman, and he's also seen time at guard. I'd guess Corcoran moves inside if Teddy's 100% ready to go, since Rhule seems to be confident in Benhart locking down that spot. I'd guess Corcoran moves inside if Teddy's 100% ready to go, since Rhule seems to be confident in Benhart. And in that situation, the entire line outside the left tackle would have at least 2 years of starting experience under their belt. Fullback's been an intriguing position since the 2 top names competing for the spot switched over from tight end. Janiran Bonner was a top 50 receiver coming out of high school, and he had to put some weight on to move into the backfield. Luke Lindenmeyer walked on last year and already looks the part of a hybrid fullback tight end at 6'4", 250. Is Bonner the better pass catcher with more speed and Luke the downhill blocker that they can rely on in the short game? I'm not sure, but each of them should have a role, and the hunt for Satterfield's next Jaheim Bell starts now. At linebacker, Nick Henrich returns from a season-ending knee injury to try and win back his starting role next to Luke Reimer. But there's another name we heard multiple times this spring, and that's John Bullock. Henrich played in 24 games the last 3 years, and Bullock's a former walk-on who's only played on special teams. On Sports Nightly, Rob Voracek mirrored some of what Rhule has said about Bullock being competitive, physical, and having high expectations from the staff. And when he was asked about Henrich, he said that he's still making progress and getting comfortable. I don't want to read too much into coach's comments, but if Bullock's got the edge after spring and Henrich is still getting back to original form, I guess this battle could go all the way into game 1 and be decided by who looks better in Minneapolis. And last, we got the safeties. Miles Farmer, who started 21 games, Marquise Buford, who started 11 last year and forced 3 turnovers, and Omar Brown, who's a former All-American from Northern Iowa. Buford's returning off a season-ending knee injury that happened 9 months ago and caused him to miss all of spring, but he was really physical in his first year as a starter and a definite bright spot in the secondary. Farmer finished second on defense with 73 tackles last year and should have a starting spot, but will they use him as a safety or a rover? And Brown's a wild card at this point. A ton of potential, can play multiple positions, and got his feet wet by playing in every game last season. The questions I have is, will all 3 of these guys play safety, or do they play multiple spots in the secondary? And is Buford fully healthy and able to take his starting spot back, or does he need more time to get comfortable on his knee? Answers I wish I knew now, but we'll soon find out. It's so hard to make predictions with so little information and so many unknowns with the new scheme, so I just do my best to wrap my head around what we've seen and heard so far to make the best guesses I can. Not that any of it matters, but I've got to find ways to get excited and make the time go quicker before week 1, so here we are. But I want to know what you think, so let me know in the comments below. If you had to pick one position group that'll finish higher than where I ranked them today, who's on the rise? Out of all the position battles, which one are you the most intrigued by, and which competition do you think will be the toughest? And if you had to choose one player who has to prove it this year, who are you going with? I've got to say Fedoni because he's got a clear path to being named the starter as long as he performs as well as we all know he can. But that's all I've got for today, so thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Go Big Red.